a WikiVidi documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. Napoleon. Napoleon Bonaparte was a French statesman and military leader who rose to prominence during the French Revolution and led several successful campaigns during the French Revolutionary Wars. He was Emperor of the French from 1804 until 1814 and again briefly in 1815 during the 100 Days. Napoleon dominated European and global affairs for more than a decade while leading France against a series of coalitions in the Napoleonic Wars. He won most of these wars and the vast majority of his battles, building a large empire that ruled over continental Europe before its final collapse in 1815. He is considered one of the greatest commanders in history, and his wars and campaigns are studied at military schools worldwide. Napoleon's political and cultural legacy has endured as one of the most celebrated and controversial leaders in human history. He was born Napoleone di Buonaparte in Corsica to a relatively modest family of Italian origin from the minor nobility. He was serving as an artillery officer in the French army when the French Revolution erupted in 1789. He rapidly rose through the ranks of the military, seizing the new opportunities presented by the revolution and becoming a general at age 24. The French Directory eventually gave him command of the Army of Italy after he suppressed a revolt against the government from royalist insurgents. At age 26, he began his first military campaign against the Austrians and their Italian allies, winning virtually every battle, conquering the Italian peninsula in a year, and becoming a war hero in France. In 1798, he led a military expedition to Egypt that served as a springboard to political power. He orchestrated a coup in November 1799 and became first consul of the Republic. His ambition and public approval inspired him to go further, and he became the first emperor of the French in 1804. Intractable differences with the British meant that the French were facing a third coalition by 1805. Napoleon shattered this coalition with decisive victories in the Toulon campaign and a historic triumph over the Russian Empire and Austrian Empire at the Battle of Austerlitz, which led to the dissolution of the Holy Roman Empire. In 1806, the Fourth Coalition took up arms against him because Prussia became worried about growing French influence on the continent. Napoleon quickly defeated Prussia at the battles of Jena and Auerstedt, then marched his Grand Army deep into Eastern Europe and annihilated the Russians in June 1807 at the Battle of Friedland. France then forced the defeated nations of the Fourth Coalition to sign the treaties of Tilsit in July 1807, bringing an uneasy peace to the continent. Tilsit signified the high water mark of the French Empire. In 1809, the Austrians and the British challenged the French again during the War of the Fifth Coalition. But Napoleon solidified his grip over Europe after triumphing at the Battle of Wagram in July. Napoleon then invaded the Iberian Peninsula, hoping to extend the continental system and choke off British trade with the European mainland, and declared his brother Joseph Bonaparte the King of Spain in 1808. The Spanish and the Portuguese revolted with British support. The Peninsular War lasted 6 years, featured extensive guerrilla warfare, and ended in victory for the Allies. The continental system caused recurring diplomatic conflicts between France and its client states, especially Russia. The Russians were unwilling to bear the economic consequences of reduced trade and routinely violated the continental system, enticing Napoleon into another war. The French launched a major invasion of Russia in the summer of 1812. The campaign destroyed Russian cities, but resulted in the collapse of the Grand Army and inspired a renewed push against Napoleon by his enemies. In 1813, Prussia and Austria joined Russian forces in the War of the Sixth Coalition against France. A lengthy military campaign culminated in a large Allied army defeating Napoleon at the Battle of Leipzig in October 1813. But his tactical victory at the minor Battle of Hanau allowed retreat onto French soil. The Allies then invaded France and captured Paris in the spring of 1814, forcing Napoleon to abdicate in April. He was exiled to the island of Elba off the coast of Tuscany, and the Bourbon dynasty was restored to power. However, Napoleon escaped from Elba in February 1815 and took control of France once again. The Allies responded by forming a seventh coalition which defeated him at the Battle of Waterloo in June. The British exiled him to the remote island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic, where he died 6 years later at the age of 51. Napoleon's influence on the modern world brought liberal reforms to the numerous territories that he conquered and controlled, such as the Low Countries, Switzerland, and large parts of modern Italy and Germany. He implemented fundamental liberal policies in France and throughout Western Europe. His Napoleonic Code has influenced the legal systems of more than 70 nations around the world. British historian Andrew Roberts states, "The ideas that underpin our modern world, meritocracy, equality before the law, property rights, religious toleration, modern secular education, sound finances, and so on, were championed, consolidated, codified and geographically extended by Napoleon. To them he added a rational and efficient local administration, an end to rural banditry, the encouragement of science and the arts, the abolition of feudalism and the greatest codification of laws since the fall of the Roman Empire." Early life. The ancestors of Napoleon descended from minor Italian nobility of Tuscan origin who had come to Corsica from Liguria in the 16th century. His parents Carlo Maria di Buonaparte and Maria Letizia Ramolino maintained an ancestral home called Casa Bonaparte in Ajaccio. Napoleon was born there on the 15th of August 1769, their fourth child and third son. A boy and girl were born first, but died in infancy. He had an elder brother, Joseph, and younger siblings Lucien, Elisa, Louis, Pauline, Caroline, and Jerome. Napoleon was baptized as a Catholic. Although he was born Napoleone di Buonaparte, he changed his name to Napoleon Bonaparte when he was 27 in 1796 upon his first marriage. Napoleon was born the same year the Republic of Genoa, a former commune of Italy, transferred Corsica to France. The state sold sovereign rights a year before his birth in 1768, and the island was conquered by France during the year of his birth and formally incorporated as a province in 1770. After 500 years under nominal Genoese rule and 14 years of independence, Napoleon's parents fought to maintain independence even when Maria was pregnant with him. His father was an attorney who went on to be named Corsica's representative to the court of Louis XVI in 1777. The dominant influence of Napoleon's childhood was his mother, whose firm discipline restrained a rambunctious child. Napoleon's maternal grandmother had married into the Swiss Fesch family in her second marriage, and Napoleon's uncle, the Cardinal Joseph Fesch, would fulfill a role as protector of the Bonaparte family for some years. Napoleon's noble, moderately affluent background afforded him greater opportunities to study than were available to a typical Corsican of the time. When he turned 9 years old, he moved to the French mainland and enrolled at a religious school in Autun in January 1779. In May, he transferred with a scholarship to a military academy at Brienne-le-Château. In his youth he was an outspoken Corsican nationalist and supported the state's independence from France. Like many Corsicans, Napoleon spoke and read Corsican and Italian. He began learning French in school at around age 10. Although he became fluent in French, he spoke with a distinctive Corsican accent and never learned how to spell French correctly. He was routinely bullied by his peers for his accent, birthplace, short stature, mannerisms and inability to speak French quickly. Bonaparte became reserved and melancholy, applying himself to reading. An examiner observed that Napoleon has always been distinguished for his application in mathematics. He is fairly well acquainted with history and geography. This boy would make an excellent sailor. In early adulthood, he briefly intended to become a writer. He authored a history of Corsica and a romantic novella. On completion of his studies at Brienne in 1784, Napoleon was admitted to the École Militaire in Paris. He trained to become an artillery officer and, when his father's death reduced his income, was forced to complete the 2-year course in 1 year. He was the first Corsican to graduate from the École Militaire. He was examined by the famed scientist Pierre-Simon Laplace. Early career. Upon graduating in September 1785, Bonaparte was commissioned a second lieutenant in La Ferrée Artillery Regiment. He served in Valence and Auxonne until after the outbreak of the revolution in 1789, and took nearly 2 years' leave in Corsica and Paris during this period. At this time, he was a fervent Corsican nationalist, and wrote to Corsican leader Pasquale Paoli in May 1789, "As the nation was perishing I was born. 30,000 Frenchmen were vomited onto our shores, drowning the throne of liberty in waves of blood. Such was the odious sight which was the first to strike me." He spent the early years of the revolution in Corsica, fighting in a complex three-way struggle among Royalists, revolutionaries, and Corsican nationalists. He was a supporter of the Republican Jacobin movement, organizing clubs in Corsica, and was given command over a battalion of volunteers. He was promoted to captain in the regular army in July 1792, despite exceeding his leave of absence and leading a riot against French troops. He came into conflict with Paoli, who had decided to split with France and sabotage the Corsican contribution to the Expedition de Sardaigne, by preventing a French assault on the Sardinian island of La Maddalena. Bonaparte and his family fled to the French mainland in June 1793, because of the split with Paoli. Siege of Toulon. In July 1793, Bonaparte published a pro-republican pamphlet entitled La Soupe de Beaucaire, which gained him the support of Augustin Robespierre, younger brother of the revolutionary leader Maximilien Robespierre. With the help of his fellow Corsican Antoine Christophe Saliceti, Bonaparte was appointed artillery commander of the Republican forces at the Siege of Toulon. He adopted a plan to capture a hill where Republican guns could dominate the city's harbour and force the British to evacuate. The assault on the position led to the capture of the city, but during it Bonaparte was wounded in the thigh. He was promoted to brigadier general at the age of 24. Catching the attention of the Committee of Public Safety, he was put in charge of the artillery of France's Army of Italy. Napoleon spent time as inspector of coastal fortifications on the Mediterranean coast near Marseille while he was waiting for confirmation of the Army of Italy post. He devised plans for attacking the Kingdom of Sardinia as part of France's campaign against the First Coalition. Augustin Robespierre and Saliceti were ready to listen to the freshly promoted artillery general. The French army carried out Bonaparte's plan in the Battle of Saorgio in April 1794, and then advanced to seize Ormia in the mountains. From Ormia, they headed west to outflank the Austro-Sardinian positions around Saorge. After this campaign, Augustin Robespierre sent Bonaparte on a mission to the Republic of Genoa to determine that country's intentions towards France. 13 Vendémiaire. Some contemporaries alleged that Bonaparte was put under house arrest at Nice for his association with the Robespierre following their fall in the Thermidorian reaction in July 1794. But Napoleon's secretary Bourrienne disputed the allegation in his memoirs. According to Bourrienne, jealousy was responsible between the Army of the Alps and the Army of Italy. Bonaparte dispatched an impassioned defense in a letter to the Commissar Saliceti, and he was subsequently acquitted of any wrongdoing. He was released within 2 weeks and, due to his technical skills, was asked to draw up plans to attack Italian positions in the context of France's war with Austria. He also took part in an expedition to take back Corsica from the British, but the French were repulsed by the British Royal Navy. By 1795, Bonaparte had become engaged to Désirée Clary, daughter of François Clary. Désirée's sister Julie Clary had married Bonaparte's elder brother Joseph. In April 1795, he was assigned to the Army of the West, which was engaged in the war in the Vendée, a civil war and royalist counter-revolution in Vendée, a region in west-central France on the Atlantic Ocean. As an infantry command, it was a demotion from artillery general, for which the army already had a full quota, and he pleaded poor health to avoid the posting. He was moved to the Bureau of Topography of the Committee of Public Safety and sought unsuccessfully to be transferred to Constantinople in order to offer his services to the Sultan. During this period, he wrote the romantic novella Clisonette Eugénie, about a soldier and his lover, in a clear parallel to Bonaparte's own relationship with Désirée. On the 15th of September, Bonaparte was removed from the list of generals in regular service for his refusal to serve in the Vendée campaign. He faced a difficult financial situation and reduced career prospects. On the 3rd of October, Royalists in Paris declared a rebellion against the National Convention. Paul Barras, a leader of the Thermidorian reaction, knew of Bonaparte's military exploits at Toulon and gave him command of the improvised forces in defense of the convention in the Tuileries Palace. Napoleon had seen the massacre of the king's Swiss guard there 3 years earlier and realized that artillery would be the key to its defense. He ordered a young cavalry officer named Joachim Murat to seize large cannons and used them to repel the attackers on the 5th of October 1795, 13 Vendémiaire and 4 in the French Republican calendar. 1,400 Royalists died and the rest fled. He had cleared the streets with a whiff of grape shot. According to 19th-century historian Thomas Carlyle in The French Revolution, A History, the defeat of the Royalist insurrection extinguished the threat to the convention and earned Bonaparte sudden fame, wealth, and the patronage of the new government, the Directory. Murat married one of Napoleon's sisters, becoming his brother-in-law. He also served under Napoleon as one of his generals. Bonaparte was promoted to commander of the interior and given command of the army of Italy. Within weeks, he was romantically involved with Josephine de Beauharnais, the former mistress of Barras. The couple married on the 9th of March 1796 in a civil ceremony. First Italian campaign. 2 days after the marriage, Bonaparte left Paris to take command of the army of Italy. He immediately went on the offensive, hoping to defeat the forces of Piedmont before their Austrian allies could intervene. In a series of rapid victories during the Montenotte campaign, he knocked Piedmont out of the war in 2 weeks. The French then focused on the Austrians for the remainder of the war, the highlight of which became the protracted struggle for Mantua. The Austrians launched a series of offensives against the French to break the siege, but Napoleon defeated every relief effort, scoring victories at the battles of Castiglione, Bassano, Arcole, and Rivoli. The decisive French triumph at Rivoli in January 1797 led to the collapse of the Austrian position in Italy. At Rivoli, the Austrians lost up to 14,000 men while the French lost about 5,000. The next phase of the campaign featured the French invasion of the Habsburg heartlands. French forces in southern Germany had been defeated by the Archduke Charles in 1796, but the Archduke withdrew his forces to protect Vienna after learning about Napoleon's assault. In the first encounter between the two commanders, Napoleon pushed back his opponent and advanced deep into Austrian territory after winning at the Battle of Darvas in March 1797. The Austrians were alarmed by the French thrust that reached all the way to Leoben, about 100 kilometers from Vienna, and finally decided to sue for peace. The Treaty of Leoben, followed by the more comprehensive Treaty of Campo Formio, gave France control of most of northern Italy and the Low Countries, and a secret clause promised the Republic of Venice to Austria. Bonaparte marched on Venice and forced its surrender, ending 1,100 years of independence. He also authorized the French to loot treasures such as the horses of Saint Mark. His application of conventional military ideas to real-world situations enabled his military triumphs, such as creative use of artillery as a mobile force to support his infantry. He stated later in life, "I have fought 60 battles and I have learned nothing which I did not know at the beginning. Look at Caesar. He fought the first like the last." Bonaparte could win battles by concealment of troop deployments and concentration of his forces on the hinge of an enemy's weakened front. If he could not use his favorite envelopment strategy, he would take up the central position and attack two cooperating forces at their hinge, swing round to fight one until it fled, then turn to face the other. In this Italian campaign, Bonaparte's army captured 150,000 prisoners, 540 cannons, and 170 standards. The French army fought 67 actions and won 18 pitched battles through superior artillery technology and Bonaparte's tactics. During the campaign, Bonaparte became increasingly influential in French politics. He founded 2 newspapers, one for the troops in his army and another for circulation in France. The Royalists attacked Bonaparte for looting Italy, and warned that he might become a dictator. All told, Napoleon's forces extracted an estimated $45 million in funds from Italy during their campaign there, another $12 million in precious metals and jewels. Atop that, His forces confiscated more than 300 priceless paintings and sculptures. Bonaparte sent General Pierre Augereau to Paris to lead a coup d'état and purge the royalists on the 4th of September, coup of 18 Fructidor. This left Barras and his Republican allies in control again, but dependent on Bonaparte, who proceeded to peace negotiations with Austria. These negotiations resulted in the Treaty of Campo Formio, and Bonaparte returned to Paris in December as a hero. He met Talleyrand, France's new foreign minister, who served in the same capacity for Emperor Napoleon, and they began to prepare for an invasion of Britain. Brought to you by WikiVidi documentaries. Would you like to know more?